with that, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to join us today. And welcome to the Data Science Hangout. If we have never met before, I'm Rachel Dempsey. I'm the host of our Hangout here, and I lead our customer marketing at Posit. If it's your first time joining, this is our open space to chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and getting to hear about what's going on in the world of data across all different industries. And so we're here every Thursday at the same time, same place. So if you're watching this recording on YouTube later and maybe want to join us live, there'll be a link below where you can add it to your calendar. At the Hangouts, we're all dedicated to making this a welcoming environment for everyone. We love to hear from everybody, no matter your years of experience, your titles, your industry, or even the languages that you work in. It's totally okay for you to just listen in here. Maybe it's during your lunch break or you're out for a walk. But there's always 3 ways you can jump in and ask questions or provide your own perspective on topics too. So you can jump in by raising your hand on Zoom, and I'll keep an eye out for that. You could put questions in the Zoom chat and just put a little star next to it if it's something you want me to read out loud instead. Otherwise, I'll just call on you to jump in the conversation. And then lastly, we have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously too. With that, I am so excited to be joined by a few different co-hosts this week. So we're doing things a little bit differently. We have 3 people joining us today from Biogen. So I'm so happy to be joined by Dan, Danielle, and Anuja from the Technology Strategy and Innovation Group at Biogen. And I first connected with Dan, I think on LinkedIn, when he reached out about a data competition they were running. And so I'm so excited to be able to learn a bit more about that today. And I thought we could just start with some introductions on your side. I don't know if Dan, you want to get started, maybe share a little bit about your role and also something you like to do outside of work.
Oh boy, right on the spot. Okay, no, great. My name is Dan Boisvert. I work at Biogen, which is a biopharmaceutical company based in Cambridge, but we're worldwide. I've been at Biogen for 12 years, which makes me sound old. I do, things change a lot over here, and they just recently changed, but I do a lot of technology strategy. I do a lot of data strategy. I really think about our clinical trial data and how we can best leverage that, both for our business, but also just for humanity, for us to develop better medicine, for us to understand disease better. So that's what I try to do. And maybe I'll hand it over to Anuja.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anuja Das. I also work at Biogen, have been there about 2.5 years. Maybe that makes me sound young. I'm not sure. But I have worked over the past few years on a variety of projects, primarily within technology, and I contribute typically from a project management and strategy contribution point of view, but I've also been able to delve into the technical aspects a little bit. My favorite part of my job so far is kind of bringing people together who speak different languages and have a variety of skill sets to work towards the same kind of end target and solution. And so the Data Jam was like a large scale embodiment of that, and it was fabulous to see. So I'm very excited to talk about that today.
And sorry, I just realized I didn't say what I do outside of work because I live here. I'm an avid disc golfer, so I don't know if anyone plays disc golf on the phone, but I'm an avid disc golfer, and I also like to bake a lot. Sorry.
Right.
So my pandemic hobby was to learn how to knit, and so I've been trying to do that, like knit myself some sweaters, which is I'm in my grandma mode, but that's what I like to do outside of work.
I love it. I might have to ask you about that because our book club was thinking about doing that as an activity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Danielle, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Cloutier. So I've been at Biogen for almost 11.5 years. So I've had many different roles at Biogen, but my most recent one is decision analytics, specifically portfolio and program modeling analytics to drive decision-making, strategic decision-making. And something I like to do outside of work was obviously love to travel, specifically eat different foods, but more recently I did take up learning how to golf.
Love it. Are all 3 of you in the Boston area?
Yes.
Okay, nice. Well, I know we kind of alluded to the data jam a little bit, so I thought it might be helpful in the beginning to just kind of share a little bit about the story of how that came to be and maybe what the data jam is.
Yeah, Danielle, do you want to give it a shot?
So so we have a couple of different community of practices at Biogen. One of them that Anuja and I lead is the data and analytics. And really the whole goal was just to get people across Biogen that are passionate about data and analytics together, just to learn sort of the different ways that we work across the different groups, find areas of opportunity and collaboration as well as network. And really the way the data jam came about is things have been pretty has been pretty interesting at work. And so we wanted to try to find a way to have a little bit of fun, try to get people together. I think Anuja had mentioned she loves getting people together. So do I. So we decided, why not try to throw together a data jam, and something that we thought would just be something small and fun turned out to be something actually very big and really showed the passion that people at Biogen has for data. I know Dan and Anuja, if you want to add on to that.
That was pretty good from my perspective. I mean, I think, anything that's successful, I think always happens something like this. Danielle and Anuja come to me in one meeting and say, hey, I think we should do it like a data competition. Like, all right, sure, let's put that together. Let's see what that looks like. And the day you send it out, I was hoping myself 30 people would show up. I thought if we had 30 people, we'd have we put 5 people on a team, you have 6 teams, you have a good competition with 6 teams. I think in the first hour, 50 people signed up. And then we just kind of went into panic mode of how we're going to organize this, which we could also talk about because there's a lot there. But really, I think it starts on something small, and then we just had such a great team together to be able to put something like this together. It really worked out well.
So I think a lot of people have ideas for things like this, or just ideas in general that they'll bring to meetings, but you all actually made it happen. How did you go from just an idea for something to making it this real life event?
Anuja, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. I think actually executing to the point of getting a data set and sending out a form for signups was fairly straightforward. We had a couple of ideas of data sets that we could use. And so we landed on one and then just kind of decided to go for it. We had enough information to execute and we sent it out. Where the challenge came in was when we saw the rate of signups, because we realized, we knew on some level, but we really saw that people love data and are passionate about it and want to work on a hackathon of sorts or a data jam of sorts. So I will say that it got a little challenging when we hit 200 to 250, because our previous kind of plan for how we were going to run it wasn't really going to work anymore given the numbers. And so there was a lot of kind of planning on the fly. So when we saw how many people there were, we kind of decided, let's do 2 rounds instead of 1. And so it was part of the excitement, but it also was part of the challenge of figuring out how to accommodate the growing number of participants. So, yeah.
I think part of it too was that we actually had support from our leadership to actually go forth and do this, and that helped a lot. I think part of it too was the fact that there has been a lot of eyes just on data in general for many different reasons. So I think that also helped. But a lot of it too was us just trying to figure out how to even pull it off. And then we did, to be completely honest.
And, I might clarify what Danielle says, because it's not like we were given a task to go run a data jam. At some point, we just had to make a decision. Like Rachel says, there are ideas all the time, right? How do you do it? There's a little bit of a leap of faith there. I think you just kind of, what's the worst that can happen is no one signs up and we just go back to our day jobs. What's the best thing that can happen is, a whole bunch of people sign up. So there is just a little bit of, boldness from this team to be able to say, all right, let's do it. Let's give it a shot and see what happens.
I think a lot of it too is we just asked. It was there's no downside. They could, expect, and so I think a lot of it was just, we just asked, and it seemed like we were able to get a lot of things, a lot of yeses, actually.
That's great. I've been thinking about doing something kind of like that at Posit, so that we could mix people across all different teams, like customer success and some of the open source package developers, to kind of work on a common problem together. And it's just been like an idea floating around in my head. So I was just curious how you went and made it actually happen. But I was wondering for the teams, were people like mixed across different parts of the company, or could people be, it could be a group of whoever wanted to join together?
We decided to randomize it. And so we had people sign up, and part of the sign up was asking what their kind of capabilities were. So is it that they've never really coded before? Are they like experts or gurus? Do they fall somewhere in the middle? So we kind of defined 4 different levels of competency and had people describe or kind of self-identify, within one of those 4. And then what we tried to do is when we did randomize teams, we tried to kind of spread the capabilities out. Honestly, most people fell in the middle, but we didn't want to put all the experts together, but also didn't want to have a team that was all novices. And so the data jam, of course, it was about data, but another kind of primary element was for people to meet each other. And so we didn't want people to just stay within their teams. So this was an opportunity to network outside as well.
Yeah, it was kind of wild, the teams, because we don't know any of the people, but Biogen's a big company. But the teams end up kind of wild, multiple time zones, people in like Buenos Aires and China and Switzerland and US. And they gave them like 3 weeks to go analyze some data. They don't know each other. They're working wildly different departments, some in manufacturing, some in sales, some in R&D. So like you're saying, Rachel, a big part is getting those people, force them into something. And I feel like you get a lot of benefit when people are forced to problem solve together, because that it creates a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of conflict. And when you get that conflict, then you get people's different opinions coming out and the different viewpoints, then you build on something together. So I think that part was really wildly successful, and people had a good time meeting people across the org.
Yeah, thank you. Alan, I see you asked a question in the chat here. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. I think Dan was kind of just speaking to part of the question, noting that folks had sort of several weeks to put something together and they were kind of all over the place. I'd really like to know more about what did they make, and how much structure did you give them to lead into that? Was this an internal and external data set, and did you give them a bunch of specific problems? Or did you say, hey, here's a pile of data, find something fun and interesting and make something? And I'm curious about the array of things that they made, and what the sharing with a great big set of 200 people, sharing that back out at scale is also really challenging. So, how did the sort of conducting of the rest of the thing kind of unfold? There's a whole bunch there. Whatever is kind of interesting to speak to, I'd love to hear about. Thanks.
Maybe Danielle?
Yeah, so we actually, so we started with an internal data set. It was a survey that was done a few years ago, specifically around data maturity at Biogen. And so we had a data set that was kind of somewhat easy to use and understand. And then the way we set it up was we gave the teams a few weeks to analyze the data set in whatever fashion or whatever type of tool they wanted to use. And the idea was to generate insights. There were a few key questions that we had asked, but other than that, it was pretty much open. And then present it not in PowerPoint. So the challenge here was to not use PowerPoint and to be creative. And so what we did was we had a few rounds of sort of battle rounds. We kind of posed it as a Eurovision, The Voice type of, head-to-head knockout battle rounds, where we had groups of, I think it was 5 or 6 teams, and then they would vote for the one team to move forward to the finale. So at the end, we had, I think, 22 teams down to 5 teams. So 5 teams? Yeah.
4 or 5, yeah.
4 or 5, I know, it's kind of a blur now, but we had it down to 5 teams. And so after that, we had the big finale, where it was something that we did in one of our auditoriums, and we had all the teams come present. We were actually able to get some executive committee members to come and do some openings and some closing. We had got our CEO there. It was a really big event where we then had people present in a Shark Tank style pitch about the data sets and sort of what they would recommend to have better data stewardship on different types of strategies with data at Biogen. And then we crowned a winner at the end. We had some trophies and medals.
I love how you're mixing all these reality shows like The Voice and Shark Tank. And I see Jesse asked a question in the chat. I see a star there, so I'll read it. But the question was, did the competition happen during work hours? And if so, how did you pitch the idea to leadership to get them on board? I know you just mentioned like the CEO was there for the beginning of the competition. What did you appeal to in order to get them to buy into the idea?
Yes, we didn't ask. We threw it out there. We threw it out there. Said, I saw another question about, did we start with a problem and have people solve the problem? We just threw a data set out there and said, look, find some insights. We left it really broad. People came back and said, well, how much time should I spend on this? And of course, data scientists could go nuts on something like this. So we tried to look, you only have 3 total weeks to work on this thing. And you have a big, broad team and everything. So for the question that was just posed, we didn't ask leadership. We asked people to volunteer, and just kind of try to keep it manageable. I forget what we said total number of hours over the 3 weeks, maybe around like 8
I think
to
we said
12.
it was up to their discretion.
It's up to their discretion. Some did a lot, but some did not so much.
Part of it too was, there was support for this. I think, we've been going through a lot of changes, and again, there's a lot of focus on data. So part of this too was a culture piece, and I think the recognition that this is a vital part of, working at a company is the culture and the experience. So I think a lot of that also allowed for this to happen and not really need permission per se.
I see Ted commented about the data governance piece being so important, and maybe this shifts a little bit away from the data jam, but like, what are some things you've learned about data governance through this or before?
Yeah, this is a good one. I can take this. My role here is around data stewardship. People talk about data governance, but personally, everyone hates data governance across the board. Executives, everyone. So I rebranded it into data stewardship, which I think evokes a little bit more of, we're all in this together, and we do our own stewardship of the information. So what we asked people to do, and I'm going to get it wrong, what we asked for like an insight, and we asked for a data stewardship recommendation, and we asked for one other thing, but I forget what that was now. But we got a lot of stuff, and then the survey itself was about how well does Biogen steward data, and how well do we leverage data. So all of the questions in the survey were about this, and then the topic was about this too. So like what we heard was probably not surprising to a lot of people, but data is hard to find. It's hard to get access to data. And then we had a lot of great recommendations on how we could improve that. Anuja, did I miss anything?
No, you covered it pretty well, but I think in addition to that, the fact that I would say 80 to 90% of the teams, which were incredibly cross-functional, came to the same conclusion, which was that data is hard to find and access. And so it's not a problem that's kind of isolated to a single group. It's pretty functional, cross-functional, which I thought was fascinating. It was expected, but it was still like very interesting to actually see it.
I think part of it too generated a lot of ideas on how to make it better. And so that was some of the pitches had sort of geared their thoughts and their pitch around, okay, yeah, this is what it is, but these are some of the ways that we could work to improve it.
I'd love to hear some of those ways to improve it, because I'm sure a lot of us are facing that too, if that's something you can share.
I know there was a lot around kind of metadata-driven cataloging, ensuring that your data isn't all over the place. There was a lot of conversation about the fact that copying data is something that happens on occasion and is obviously not best practice. So I think the big ones that we saw were essentially a catalog to understand what data even exists, so that we know what's there, and then find a way for people who need to access it to be able to access it. So that was a big one that we saw.
And the other piece really was actually having an enterprise-wide strategy. I think that was one of the key things that was, identified, was just needing some sort of consistent across enterprise and not just specific to each of the different individual functions.
I'm trying to think back to, this was in May, so it was a little bit ago, but one of the ones that resonated with me was, not to kind of create like a partial catalog or something like that, where as soon as you create it, it's out of date and then ends up being another stale data asset that you have. So really trying to weigh, like Danielle is saying, to enterprise it or productionalize it, and then find ways to make sure that it's sustainable long term. Because I feel like that's where we always end up with a hiccup of like, how do we could get it going, but then how do we actually keep it going?
Mm-hmm. Is that your team that's responsible for enterprise data strategy? Or I'm trying to remember the name of the group, technology strategy and innovation, or is that another company?
No, mine's like the piece that I'm in charge of is the clinical trial data. But so obviously at Biogen, there's more data than that, but the enterprise is kind of just across all the individual functions. They do probably similar to what it looks like at Posit, probably similar to what it looks like at everyone else's company.
Yeah. There was an anonymous question that was from a technology perspective, how did teams interact on the data jam? Did they use common tools?
There was a variety, and I think the randomization of teams kind of spoke to what tools ended up being used. So, for instance, we obviously didn't interact with every single team, but what ended up happening was there was a kind of data communication person, a person in charge of creating the output, a person who was more of the programmer, and then a person who was kind of describing what the approach would be to actually solving the problem. So it really depended on, what programming tools the people within that specific team were most comfortable with, which kind of made it more exciting because we had people working in R, people working in SAS, people working in Power BI, amongst others. And so folks did rely a lot on what we had in-house, just because it's kind of, sensitive data, so we didn't want to kind of put it on external tools, but there was still quite a variety of what was used to produce the end results and the solutions.
Thank you. George, I see you had a question in the chat just now, but maybe also one from earlier, so feel free to ask both there.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering if you obtained any feedback from the participants on, the different aspects, like the technology side, especially that, they may not really interact with a lot, cross-functional.
Anuja or Danielle, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so we did actually do a post-event survey. So a lot of it was just understanding, thoughts and feedback on the format. Would they participate in something like this again? I think at the end of the day, there was a lot of really positive feedback on the actual data jam and wanting to do it again. And there were just obviously some logistical things that we had to deal with that we could always make better for next time. I think one of the challenges was the different geographic locations. I think that was tough trying to find, teams that were kind of spread across when they could actually meet because of the different time zones. So there are a lot of things that we have sort of on our list to think about for Data Jam 2.0. But at the end, we did get a lot of positive feedback and a lot of good ideas for the next one. And Anuja, Dan, anything to add?
No, I actually don't think we got too much feedback in the way of usage of tools. The technology piece, actually, it seemed to work pretty well depending on what people wanted to use. To Danielle's point, it was more logistics, and then there was also feedback around the type of data set that we could potentially use for upcoming data jams. So for instance, for this one, we did surveys, and some people love analyzing survey data, some people despise it. So there was some feedback there around, what else can we do moving forward and what data sets could we use.
I think that was another good point. A lot of people had offered, like, hey, we're going to do this again. Can you please use our data? So that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, that's exciting. Now you're getting people thinking about, hey, I want to use my data for this. I see there are a few questions in the chat here too. I think Kevin, you asked one about different formats that people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea of forcing them not to use PowerPoint, because I definitely find PowerPoint presentations, I definitely learn less from PowerPoint presentations than any other format I think that exists. But I'm curious, like, what other formats people ended up using, instead of PowerPoint.
So some people use the Power BI dashboards directly and went through that. Others use some forms of like Canva or animations. There was one really cool group that did sort of these animations to tell their story. Anything I know, so a lot of Power BI, Canva, animations.
There were a couple of Shiny applications.
Oh, there you go, Shiny, yeah.
Go ahead.
There were, so when you put this question out there, you never know what you're going to get, right? You have to come back. It has to be a presentation under 5 minutes, I think.
Yep.
5 minutes. It has to explain like these 3 things. So what are we going to get? It's kind of unbelievable. I mean, we had people like dressing up in costumes. We had people do like a set of like trivia questions.
Oh, that's right, the Kahoot.
And then we definitely some animation, like to tell the whole story. People walking through the Power BI dashboard, people walking through Shiny apps, stuff like that. But some really interesting stuff, and I think people had fun with it, even if they didn't have like a big, epiphany of data science in this. But they were just able to present something, because we know you need a lot of skills for data science, right? And so part of the storytelling and everything is part of it too, getting the message across.
Which formats do you think were most effective?
I would say the funnier the better, personally, for this one. But I think it really depends on what message you're trying to convey. I mean, I think we have some people who did some really deep statistical analyses, and they had Shiny apps up. And I think that was really helpful to do that stuff. But for like the big, broad 300-person audience, I think you want to go big and go creative.
Yeah, I think when we think about the finale, there were a few that were Power BI, but they didn't just do Power BI. They had sort of some animations, or the way they had presented it was a little bit on the more creative side.
Yeah, I like this idea of like just making it accessible to whatever tools people wanted to use. Like if they wanted to present it in Canva, which is a tool I love for doing design too, that they could use whatever they wanted.
Yeah, and I feel like, oh, sorry, Dan. I was just going to say, it was less about the output, like one type of output being more effective than the other, but more so about how you communicated what you were trying to get at, how you communicated your story. So I feel like I saw effective presentations across all formats.
And I was just going to say, we're trying to make it as inclusive as possible. So it's not, only for PhD statisticians, of which we have a lot here. It's like really, it could be a novice, have no idea anything about data, but you'd be maybe more creative for the presentation side, and you could like hear from them. So, a lot of like cross-pollination with different people, and really keeping it open, use whatever you want, do whatever you want.
Yeah, and I think the teams also really leveraged the skill sets and the strengths of each member on their team. So some of the people were more heavy in the background, and some of the other people were more front and center in terms of presentation. So I think a lot of teams use that to their advantage as well.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. George, you'd like a follow-up on that kind of?
Yeah, actually, I was wondering, if any of those creative formats have become normalized in the culture, because it seems like such a variety. I mean, I don't expect someone to just like constantly, dance and do an interpretive dance to their presentations, but something along the lines of, a little bit more creativity and going beyond the PowerPoint. Have any of those become like a mainstay?
I mean, speaking personally now, when I try to do something, I think about what can I use other than PowerPoint. I don't know if that's necessarily across the board, but it's definitely something that I keep in mind. Anytime I'm trying to present some sort of visualization or insights, is trying to be a little bit more creative.
Yeah, I think we definitely got some feedback saying, "Oh, I have to rethink about how I've been presenting in analytics results." And our CEO is definitely anti-PowerPoint too. So, he likes the idea of information being communicated in some other way that's more like other people are saying here. It's more accessible, more easier to interpret.
I'm feeling bad for PowerPoint right now. Some PowerPoints are beautiful too, but I see, Alan, you had a question a little bit earlier. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. I was curious if there were insights or things in particular from what people produce that could be pulled back by the owners of the data to turn into, anything that becomes programmatic or insights that they can then act on. Like that obviously would be a great outcome. Like, hey, we get 100, 200 people together and it's a great engaging activity, and it's super cool if the team that owns that data could say, hey, you found a bunch of stuff, or you started some ideas that we can capitalize on and take forward. Were they able to take anything like that away?
We'll let you, Dan, speak about it.
So I think a lot of data jams go with this idea of like, here's this data set, or maybe like Kaggle's like this, right? Here's this data set, figure out this thing for me. And ours wasn't exactly like that. So we didn't know exactly what might come out of it. But I can tell you what came out of it, at least from my perspective. I know a lot of people reached out to some of the people who were either Shiny developers or Power BI to get consults on, how to do stuff. Our CEO reached out to us and asked, how do we fix this whole data problem that we have at Biogen? He just heard for 2 hours during the data jam. And I had one more, but then I lost it. Oh, and the one of the metadata catalogs that someone recommended, they called it Dash. I forget what it stood for. But it was like an idea of just a metadata catalog, and that's being taken up by our computational biology in research, and they're going to try to push that forward next year.
Maybe this isn't something you can necessarily put a number around, but have you seen that people are working better cross-functionally because of the data jam?
Biogen is a big company. I think we have about 7,000 employees worldwide. So I don't know that we can really get a pure KPI on that one. But I think you definitely hear of some interactions that never would have taken place before. And, I think we run these 2 community of practices, which I think are kind of like this, where you get people who are passionate about something together. You have them talk about different topics. We have one around data stewardship that I run, and one about Biogen analytics and data community of practice, which they call Bad Cop, which Danielle and Anuja run. But we've definitely had more people volunteer for leadership in there, and we're getting their voices in to continue this conversation.
I mean, I can say too that I've gotten a lot of feedback on, oh, thank you so much for having this. I was able to connect with this person, and now I was able to solve whatever issue or whatever problem, or I was able to get extra help on this. So there has been a lot of connections made that then help somebody in their current role or responsibility.
That's great. Okay, Kevin, with the hard question in the chat. Do you want to jump in here, Kevin?
So your CEO asked you, like, how do you fix the whole data problem? I'm just curious, like, what did you say, or what are you planning on getting back to him with an answer for that question? That's a big question.
It was a big question, and we were kind of like, okay, yeah, we'll get back to you. We thought about it for a long time, and I think we've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, I'm not sure what organization you're in, but like a lot of these initiatives come and go, and a lot of hype about, fix the world through data, or fix the entire business through data. So we talked about this a lot, Danielle, Anuja, myself, Sam, and the idea, everyone wants the answer to this. So okay, well, the answer is it's complicated. But I think the answer that we really need to do is, where do we want to be as an organization with data? And we need to start from there, and then, go down through like exactly like how do we want to improve our business, and then try to connect our data scientists, our data innovators into those real business decisions or business questions that are there. So that's the my 5-minute Shark Tank pitch on what you need to do. You need to align the business, you need to get them go state their position on data, because otherwise people like us, we always just like, we do our initiatives, we try to do our things, and it all hits some glass ceiling at some point, which we're all too familiar with. I don't know, Danielle, Anuja.
I was just going to say, I think, the one of the things that we had recommended, and so we had worked on putting sort of this proposal together, which is very, inclusive of what Dan was talking about. But I think the first thing was really just actually having an enterprise-wide data strategy goal. And it's, something on as a goal for our metrics to at least have some traction against at that enterprise-wide level.
One of the anonymous questions from a little bit earlier was, what did you think about the follow through? Are you collecting and resharing people's sharings? Is there follow through to hold another event?
We did a couple of things at the end to essentially make people's solutions accessible to all of Biogen. So just for some context, the finale following all the battle rounds was open invite to everyone. And so we had a number of people join from various different departments who weren't necessarily participating in the data jam. And so one thing we did was collect links to everyone's Power BIs and dashboards and Shiny applications and kind of final findings, and put them in an accessible location for everyone to view and see. Because it was a 5-minute Shark Tank pitch, we couldn't necessarily delve into the details. And so this gave people the opportunity to look into how people did the analysis and what the more detailed findings were. So that's one thing that we did. We would love to hold another data jam because this one has been so successful. We haven't necessarily planned for one yet, but we're I think still hoping to do one. But what has happened, what has happened is, I think Danielle mentioned earlier, is people have been coming to us with the data sets that have the potential to spin off another data jam. And so we're kind of playing with the idea of potentially doing one that's a little more maybe hardcore data science for specifically folks who want to dive into the more intense data science techniques on a specific data set. And so instead of doing a big data jam like we did before, maybe in the interim, we do a mini data jam of sorts. And so there have been several opportunities to kick something off. We just have to kind of get together and decide what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think, Dan, I mentioned our community of practices earlier. So that's another avenue that we try to sort of keep this going, the conversation going through.
We've talked a lot about, in these data science hangouts, about data storytelling and communication, and sometimes relaying that back to having to do your own marketing. And I was wondering if you had any marketing lessons learned throughout this process too. Although it sounds like you're very successful because you got way more people to sign up than you thought we were going to.
No, the marketing is key. So Sam, who's not here today, but she's our marketing expert. And I do think marketing makes a big difference. I think when we sent out, or we called it a data jam, it sounds kind of fun. We had a lot of fun things. We had a logo with a piece of jam on it, toast with jam on it. I know
data is my jam was the whole theme.
Data is my jam is the theme. I know when we had the finale, the music was Jammin' by Bob Marley. We were coming in, people were walking in. And I think when we sent it out, I know we had a one-page flyer to describe this. It had very little detail. It said work with your colleagues, and we really try to say what's in it for them. What did they get out of it, instead of what are really explaining what we're doing. We're just kind of saying, what's in it for you. You get to meet your colleagues, get to work on something interesting.
Oh, don't forget the 7 C's of jamming.
Yeah, I don't remember the 7 C's. Collaboration.
Creativity, collaboration. There's a bunch of C's. And the last one we just jokingly called for the 7th, C fun.
We couldn't come up with a 7th one, but
yeah, I think it was fun for our team too, because all 4 of us love data and love getting people together. So we got really kind of creative and crazy with the way that we were pitching it too. And so, yeah, the logo, for instance, we did a couple of stickers. We had kind of swag set up in the office as much as we could. and tried to make it fun.
I really like listening to the way that the three of you all like play off each other and like answer these questions and go back and forth. It just sounds like you did such an amazing job with this event, like thinking of all the different parts that make it what it is. And I hope that you got the recognition internally for this event and going like above and beyond to do that. And was just curious to learn a little bit more about what that maybe looked like.
I mean, I think for one thing is our CEO joined and he was only planning to join for 20 minutes. He ended up staying the full 2 hours. So that was really great. And I think, again, there's a lot of positive feedback afterwards. And people are looking forward to another one. So I think that's the best, recognition right there.
Yeah. And I will say for kind of the four of us, we kind of organically worked really well together, which I don't know how that happened, but I'm glad that it did. We each took on the roles that came most naturally to us. So for instance, Sam, she loves putting together graphics and she did marketing, and then someone else would take on the networking piece, someone else would take on the logistics piece, and so we each just knew what our role was within the grand scheme of things, and that kind of helped us to work really well together from the start. So not a lot of conflict in the internal team, which is always good.
I mean, we were joking if we were like an actual team about all the awesome things we could get done.
So we went heavy on the data jam today and diving into all parts of that, but I'm curious to learn a little bit more about some of the other things that you're working on as well, and like the everyday kind of business problems that you're solving too.
Oh boy. Okay.
That sounded like a heavy sigh. You don't have to answer.
It's fine.
That.
It's fine. It's complicated. I mean, a big one that my team is working on is reuse of clinical trial data. So clinical trial data is personal information, obviously, but it's like protected personal information. It's very, very valuable, right? I mean, we know, we study diseases that don't have cures. We study diseases that don't have medicines. We're trying to find better ways to treat the disease. We're trying to find better ways to measure the disease. And that's all, held together in this clinical trial data that we run. So a big thing that I'm working on right now is how do we best leverage this? It is immensely complicated. There's many privacy regulations, many GCP, good clinical practice regulations around this. But I have this feeling that we need to find a way to use the data up to its maximum potential or maximum allowability and no further. But if we just say, hey, it's complicated, I'm not touching that, I feel like we're like losing a big piece of medicinal development. So that's a big piece that I'm working on. I know Anuja is helping me on that. See what they have to say, what they're working on. I'm sure it's different.
So for me specifically, oh, you want to go?
No, go for it, Danielle.
So for me specifically, a lot of what I do is really focused on understanding sort of the business risk for some of our portfolio and programs. So really understanding what our portfolio looks like, what are the decisions that we're trying to make to whether we progress programs or we terminate programs. So a lot of it has to do with really modeling and understanding our current portfolio, the different decision points, the investment points, what's the risk, what's the value, and ultimately coming up with insights for leadership and our governance to then decide, what our portfolio should look like, what are the programs, what are the things that we invest in. But again, a lot of this is balancing the business risk with the scientific risk. So lots of different I'm focused a lot more on the operational data more than anything, but a lot of it is, balancing out those different risks and really helping decision makers understand what their options are.
So I've been lucky enough to kind of work with several different folks within analytics and data sciences. So I am helping Dan with part of his secondary use project, but I think my biggest project is around automation for our end-to-end clinical reporting and analytics space. And so I help to manage, but also contribute to the strategy of understanding, what can be automated and also what should be automated, because there's a lot that can be automated, but we want to make sure that, the resourcing that we put into it is worth the impact that it will eventually drive. And so part of that is, playing with the fact that, people work in SaaS, but how do we bring in additional languages? How do we bring in more additional analytics techniques? When is it worth doing that? And what is the best way logistically to also bring that in? So it started off as like a smaller scope of work, but it's kind of ballooned out to be this, massive initiative that has been very fun to work on. So
thank you all for sharing. Really interesting. I wanted to remind everybody with 10 minutes left here that if I missed any questions from anybody in the chat among conversation, feel free to just repost it there or raise your hand here too. But I know Bill loves this question and we have to ask it too, but was there any application of AI or chat GPT or large language models in this?
I can take that. So we got a lot of questions of, can I take this data and copy and paste it into ChatGPT? Which the answer is no. Just FYI, if you work at a big company, that answer is no. But we have an internal instance of ChatGPT that's secure. And people did use that. We had comments. So I forget how many people took the survey, 300 something. And people wrote comments in there. And so people were doing like sentiment analysis of the comments and trying to pick out some insights that were in the comments, which was fun.
Thank you. Anuja, I really like that point you just brought up about, like, we talk about automation a lot, but when is it worth going through the process of doing the automation and using resources to do that? And I'm curious, like, how do you figure that out?
I mean, that's tough, right? Because you have an initial estimate of, I'll be able to develop the macros or the scripts needed to be able to automate this in X amount of time. But then there's other pieces that we need to factor in around, how long is it going to take to adopt? How long is it going to take to scale? And then there's a learning curve associated with it as well. So that's something we've been, as more people become aware of the automation initiative, it's automatically leading to more ideas flowing in. And so we're really having to put a structure in place to try and gauge from the very beginning how much resourcing is going to be used in order to make this. And so I know that doesn't really answer your question, but that's because, it's tough to gauge right from the very beginning how much resourcing is going to be put in. But we do try to account for both, development in addition to change management, in addition to adoption, and set kind of tangible and achievable targets intermittently.
Yeah, I was going to say queue up the XKCD, but I see someone.
I saw someone put that in the chat, and I was like,
there.
it's got to be the one. I think it is.
That's a good one for us to all take.
I remember that one, and I didn't know where to find it. Yeah. Nessa, I see you had a follow-up question from the previous question. You want to jump in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the internal instance of ChatGPT you're dealing with, because, well, I've been talking to a bunch of pharma companies. I'm really interested in how people are doing this. Is it a web chat tool with a GUI, like most people access ChatGPT in the real world, or is it all API based? And also, is it accessible to people who are not data scientists? Like, can a chemist access this really easily?
I don't know much about it. I feel like when I saw it, it was command line. So I would not call that a GUI. But I think it's like a private Azure instance of the GPT. But I don't know too much. But no, I don't think we don't have like a ChatGPT for Biogen, where it's like friendly user interface and ask it any question. We don't have that yet.
Let's see.
Cool. Thank
Alan,
you.
Yeah, thank you all for the great questions. I see, Alan, you had a follow-up question around more of the like broader community events. Want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm just curious if there are other kind of things that connect, into like a single sort of community of practice for folks who participated in the jam, but also more broadly, do you have other events? Is there other kind of conscientious organizing going on? Just curious what that looks like to kind of keep these folks seeing one another and potentially connecting beyond that event.
Yeah, I can speak for the community of practice that we run. So we try to have forums. Well, we were trying to have it, at least every other month. And so there's a series that we have called Data Bites. And basically what it is either bringing somebody from IT or somebody from the community to talk about the work that they're doing. And or more recently, we had one that was actually somebody that participated in Data Jam and wanted to leverage the Data Jam network to look at their data and help generate insights.
Oh, cool.
And I know we've also talked about doing some more collective meetings across the different communities. So kind of gathering all the different communities together on a more regular basis, just because Data Jam did bring a lot of those communities together. And so there are definitely plans to start to continue that. It's been a little bit hectic at Biogen lately, so we haven't been able to do as much as we wanted to, but I think now that things are somewhat settling, we are definitely looking at sort of the next few key events.
Cool, thanks. I hope those are successful. Sounds like a really good foundation.
Bill, I see you had a question around their environment. You want to jump in? And the question was around different cloud providers. Are you heavy into Azure or AWS, one over the other, or do you have mostly on-prem data versus cloud? And as always, no worries if these are certain questions that you can't answer too.
I'm pretty sure I have a little bit of everything.
That's a good answer.
Double check here to see if there were any questions that we missed. It's something I was curious about when you were talking about the different community events and people who maybe are like new to data science as well. What does the training look like for your team? So if somebody maybe, I guess there's two factors here, like onboarding for someone who comes in with data science experience or analytics experience versus also somebody who maybe hadn't used data science before but wants to.
Maybe Danielle.
So I guess a lot of it really is on the job training. So it's really just once you working with the team, working with your manager. But at the same time too, I know for some of what we hire for, we try to sort of be a little bit diverse. So a lot of times there are some technical aspects that we are looking for, but a lot of the times for anything really data related in my world, I look for people that are just genuinely curious and want to solve problems. So I feel like as long as you have those two skills and that you're willing to learn, that's pretty much how we get things done. I don't know, Dan, in your space, if it's any different, but that's at least how I sort of handle things over here.
Yeah, I think in the data science groups, we hire a lot of more senior people. There's not like a lot of entry-level roles there. But I think maybe you're also hinting at like although I hate the word, a data literacy kind of effort of how does every single person in the entire organization know not to present a pie chart, and stuff like that. And that's something that we need to look at. And I think these community practices that we have are the best way that we can really do it. It's organic. It's, leaning on people already wanting to learn and then like kind of helping them get up to the next level with what they already want to learn.
I know, kind of speaking to the communities of practice, but there are some, like ours are a little more general, but there are specialized ones. So there's a machine learning group that dives into that a little bit more, and we're about to start a data science conference, which will bring in kind of speakers and the such for people to learn a little bit more there.
Thank you so much. I feel like I just have to say this because Biogen's in Boston, but I run the Boston user group with my co-host Kevin. And if anybody from the team would be interested in joining us, I just shared the link to our event in the chat. But we have a series of lightning talks coming up, and it'd be cool to do some events with some others from Biogen too. Let me double check here on any questions we missed. If anybody in the last minute here wants to raise your hand, feel free. Well, thank you all so much for joining. It's really awesome to hear how well the data jam went and how many people were interested in the event too. That there's been a number of people who've reached out to me around holding their own sort of data competitions, and I'm so excited to be able to share this as a resource with them too.
Thank you so much for having us. This was
Yeah,
fun.
thanks, Rachel. This is
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. You can find us through this or on LinkedIn for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye,
You too.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.